voy a tomar la palabra sobre los militares. Pues nosotras las mujeres, sobre los soldados del gobierno que vienen en nuestras comunidades, pues las mujeres pues nos da coraje pues que venga a nuestra comunidad, que pasa aquí en los caminos con sus cañones y con sus tanques, que siempre está pasando aquí en nuestras comunidades. Nosotros no queremos los soldados aquí en nuestra comunidad, porque no necesitamos soldados, sino que...
Más adelante, para que salgamos en la lucha avante, porque nuestra patria grita y necesita de todo el esfuerzo de los zapatistas.
Article 27, a result of the Mexican Revolution of the early 1900s, spearheaded by rebels such as Emiliano Zapata, promised land redistribution to the peasants and communal ownership of that land. Article 27 was amended in 1992 to permit the privatization of communal land holdings as encouraged by NAFTA. As a result, the promise of land was broken to the peasant populations of Mexico. On January 1, 1994, the day NAFTA went into effect, the Zapatista Army of National Liberation emerged from the Selva Lacandon, denouncing NAFTA as a death sentence for the indigenous people of Mexico. The Zapatistas occupied the towns of San Cristóbal de las Casas, Las Margaritas, Ocosingo, Altamirano, and other villages in Chiapas. Municipal buildings were seized, prisoners freed from jails, and government shops opened to the populace. The initial insurrection lasted for 12 days and left 400 dead. Although on and off peace talks with the government have followed, there has been no real peace.
La selva lacandona ya ha sido visitada por diversas representaciones de los gobiernos de sus países. Nos han visitado los aviones bombarderos, los helicópteros artillados, los tanques de guerra, los satélites espías, los asesores militares y los agentes, algunos secretos y otros no tan secretos, de todas las dependencias de espionaje de varios países. Todos estos visitantes tienen un objetivo común: el asesinato y el robo. Diversos gobiernos del mundo se han aliado con el gobierno mexicano para combatirnos a nosotros. La más moderna y sofisticada tecnología de guerra es lanzada en contra de las armas de madera, los pies rotos y el pensamiento ancestral de los zapatistas, que declara sin pena ni miedo que el lugar del conocimiento, la palabra y la verdad está en el corazón. La muerte moderna contra la vida ancestral, el neoliberalismo contra el neozapatismo. ¿Por qué nos temen? ¿Por qué tanta muerte para tan pocos y tan pequeños? Porque los hemos desafiado, y lo peor del desafío es que se convierte en ejemplo.
En el estado de Chiapas es un estado así muy rico en recursos naturales, por ejemplo el petróleo, la madera y todo lo otro. Entonces, con eso mismo, entonces quieren otra vez explotar, quieren sacar el petróleo, quieren sacar la madera. Entonces ellos tienen esos objetivos, ¿sí?, de seguir explotando. Es lo que pretenden hacer. O sea, traen un pretexto y en el fondo, adentro, ¿sí?, traen otras intenciones. Porque siempre el gobierno mexicano ha sido muy corrupto, ha tratado de engañar a muchos miles de indígenas, muchos mexicanos. Siempre ha sido su trabajo, es engañar, ¿sí?, poner un buen pretexto para que pueda hacer lo otro. Entonces, ya lo conocemos.
In the Lacandon jungle, for example, where you can find precious woods like mahogany and cedar, you will find trucks coming out of the jungle with these huge slabs of wood, precious wood. They're huge, right? and these trucks have no license plate. You know, they don't appear to have any markings on them that they belong to some company or whatever. And it's the government. It's the government and the different families that are using their influence to be able to make money hand over fist. The government says that it's the campesinos, right? They try to look very ecologically correct, and they say, oh, you know, we ban people from tree cutting, for example, but the damn campesinos, you know, go and they cut the trees, you know. And that in no way, the cutting that the campesinos have been doing historically since this land came into existence, in no way compares to the chainsaws and the trucks, you know, and the powerful lumber companies who are the ones who are really pillaging the area, right? And a lot of this information, you know, is not well known, I think, among people.
Well, the large-scale exportation of mahogany and cedar really began at the end of the 19th century when lumberers from the state of Tabasco cleared timber for the northern market. And as I understand, by 1908, 27% of the landmass in Chiapas was owned by foreign companies. And then came the cattle frontier, which started moving in the 1940s, and by 1960 had taken over the whole northern third of the jungle. And at the same time, almost simultaneously, the Mexican government began to encourage mass migration to the selva as a way to settle land disputes and political conflicts in other areas. And today, I mean, 30% of the original surface area of 1.4 million hectares has been destroyed in the past 30 years alone, and it's estimated that only 12% of the jungle remains fully intact. It's recently been uncovered that Pulsar, a major financial complex, along with International Paper, Simpson Paper, and Louisiana Pacific, 3 U.S. firms, have been negotiating for several years with the Mexican government, working to open up Mexico's legal framework to allow for access to more than 1.5 million acres of campesino and indigenous agricultural lands in the states of Chiapas, Tabasco, Campeche, and Veracruz. And they want access to this land for tree plantations, mostly fast-growing eucalyptus, and their goal is to produce 6 million cubic meters of pulp for paper making every year. Eucalyptus is well known for sucking all nutrients and groundwater from the soil, leaving basically desert in its path, and plantations like these typically last about 30 years. Jaime Aviles, who's a columnist for the Mexican daily paper La Jornada, calls eucalyptus the perfect neoliberal tree. He says it grows very quickly, kills everything near it, and makes a lot of money for very few people.
Mexico is not one of the biggest, I mean, it's a fairly large country, but it's not the size of Brazil or the size of Indonesia or something. And yet, if you add up all the beetles and all the birds and all the mammals and what have you, it's actually the 3rd richest country for biodiversity in the whole world, which is pretty stunning. And then you come down to the south, and Chiapas is the richest state in the whole of the country. And then you come to the Lacandon forest, and this is the richest forest in the whole of the formerly all everywhere forested state of Chiapas. So this is an incredibly rich place. And over the whole of Chiapas, something like 80% of all the butterflies in Mexico occur here. 66% of all of Mexico's bird species are occurring here. And it's the same kind of high percentages for trees and for orchids and all kinds of stuff. So this place is incredibly diverse. And in this area, the Lacandon forest, there is a biodiversity of quite extraordinary magnitude. And there's a biosphere reserve, the Monte Azul Biosphere Reserve, which sort of protects some of it in a classical way. But of course, there's also the indigenous people here, which are also very, very important for the protection of the whole area.
There are 400,000 people living in 200 different human settlements in the Lacandon jungle. And neither the government or anyone else has been able to reconcile the conflicting interests and activities that are related to the jungle. And of course, the living conditions for people haven't improved. And so poverty and displacement continue to push people further into the jungle. And also, I mean, the Lacandone, like forests all over the world, is being destroyed. It's threatened by US and multinational corporations.
In a way, right, rainforest destruction, I mean, okay, yes, there's a climatic impact of rainforest destruction, which could eventually affect people, you know, in the United States. But there's a whole lot of other effects as well, which are perhaps a little more subtle, and which, you know, you don't necessarily think about straight off. Now, you know, every year a whole load of the birds that are in the US disappear. Where do they go? Well, quite a lot of them actually come down here. About 60 species actually come down here. And they don't just sort of disperse randomly once they're down here. They get south of the border and start whizzing around all over randomly around Mexico. They go to very, very specific places. And people have done things like they put bands on the birds, and you can trace where the birds move, and you can often find that they're going, you know, to the same place year after year after year, and their offspring will go to the same place year after year after year. Now, I mean, that means that they have a very, very rigid flight path which they follow. Now, what happens is that if an area to which they traditionally go gets destroyed, then they get very confused, basically, and often they simply die. They don't know where to go next. They don't know how to forage anywhere else. They just, you know, they may get eaten by something because they're wandering around like, what the heck's gone? Where's my forest gone? You know, where was that tree? And so you get big diminutions in population.
Un sistema mundial hace posible que el crimen se haga gobierno en México. Un sistema nacional hace posible que el crimen mande en Chiapas. Luchando en las montañas del sureste mexicano, luchamos por México, por la humanidad y contra el neoliberalismo.
They're losing their lives. You know, for them it's not just, oh, I'll lose my livelihood. You know, for them it's, I'm going to lose my life. They take my land away. What am I going to do? Am I going to be a beggar in Mexico City? Am I going to be a migrant worker in the United States? No, you know, I want to remain on my land. I want to be able to retain some kind of dignity, you know, in terms of who I am and how my family lives. And this sentiment is what historically has caused social turmoil in Mexico. And in 1910, it caused the revolution. I mean, Emiliano Zapata's battle was about the people's claim, the indigenous people's claim to the land. And the result of that was Article 27, which guaranteed them communal land, the ownership of communal land.
Despite the incredible natural wealth of Chiapas, its people are the poorest in all of Mexico. Chiapas is home to the highest percentage of indigenous people in Mexico, most of whom are of Mayan descent. Chiapanecos produce 54% of Mexico's hydropower, 13% of its corn, 13% of its gas, 5% of its timber, and 4% of its beans and oil. Nearly half of the people who live in Chiapas have no running water.
Todos los pueblos que están en resistencia, las comunidades que no reciben nada del gobierno, pues ciertamente su situación económica, su situación social está sumamente crítica. Ahora que también hay una situación así general de que han subido los precios de las mercancías, hay mucha carencia pues en todo. En todas las comunidades lo sienten mucho más todavía. Los que están en resistencia pues viven una situación ahora pues muy difícil, porque ya no pueden salir ni siquiera a trabajar fuera de su comunidad como antes lo hacían, cuando no estaban los campamentos militares, cuando no había una presión militar. Mucha gente salía a otros pueblos a buscar trabajo con el fin de conseguir dinero y regresa a su casa con un poco de dinero. Pero ahora ya no hay esa posibilidad, están controlados y no hay posibilidad de buscar trabajo aquí cerca. Así que la situación está muy, muy difícil ahora.
I feel personally that we are obliged to do all we can to help indigenous people have their lands, their dignity, their way of life, and really to let them develop at their own pace, you know, without us forcing change upon them. And the intrusion of the market, it is horrendous how quickly it begins to sever community ties, because it generates individualism when, in fact, as we've been hearing, you know, throughout the days here, that essentially it's community we should be dealing with. And it is the way that community holds together that is the strength which enables us to care for our environment.
For those of us in the United States who fight for social justice, who have been committed to a different vision for humanity, sometimes we say, well, that's over there. That's like, I can't relate to it. My work is affirmative action, or my work is fighting, the devastation of the forest or whatever in the States. But people have to begin to understand that that's not the way the world works these days. The world works without borders. These transnationals work without borders. They're accountable to no one. They don't consider the borders a reality.
Sí estamos convencidos que el que tiene el poder, ¿sí?, de decidir de qué es lo que se va a hacer y qué es lo que no se va a hacer, es el pueblo organizado. Entonces por eso nosotros hemos apostado pues a que todos los bienes que son del pueblo, pues que sean para el pueblo y que se beneficie el pueblo y que el pueblo decida qué es lo que se debe hacer. Pero actualmente en México no existe eso. Pero es por una cosa muy grave, es porque en México no existe la democracia, además la libertad y la justicia. Precisamente porque no hay esas cosas, porque no hay justicia, por eso es que ha estado todo mal distribuido, porque no hay justicia agraria, pues. Entonces lo que se necesita es justicia agraria, donde todos...
Now, one of the major reasons behind this conflict in Chiapas, right, is the existence of 18 uncapped oil wells in the Lacandon.
One of the Zapatistas' key demands is this whole phenomenon of autonomy, indigenous autonomy, and the government is deathly afraid that this means territorial economy or autonomy and and some control, if not total control, over the exploitation of natural resources. The problem is, of course, you can't get natural gas or petroleum out of where it is unless you have some infrastructure built. And it's really difficult to build infrastructure in the middle of a rebellion.
As soon as the indigenous uprising occurred in January of 1994, January 1st, the planes and helicopters, particularly that had been supplied by the United States, with the formal agreement that these were only to be used against narco-traffickers, are immediately brought into action against the indigenous peasant rebels of the Zapatista movement. There are also U.S. military trainers present in Mexico. For instance, we talked to soldiers in San Cristobal de las Casas, in the local bars and cantinas and so forth in January, who had gone through training programs in Mexico under U.S. military officers. Much of this assistance, the training, the equipment, the weaponry, has come under the label of the drug war, which of course is ironic because many, many different independent studies have indicated that the Mexican military itself is linked to narcotics trafficking.
Sí, bueno, mira, en el mes de marzo, en esta ruta que se llama Margarita San Quintín, estuvieron transitando soldados del ejército de Estados Unidos con gorras y banderas de los Estados Unidos, pudimos detectar en varias ocasiones, ¿sí? Además, gente del Campamento Civil por la Paz también detectó eso. Pero no solo eso.
This is not Nicaragua, this is not Angola, this is not some small and distant country. This is our neighbor on the North American continent, a nation whose history, whose people, whose culture is deeply intertwined with our own. It's a nation of 100 million people, one river away, and we are making a major military commitment to a very unstable and corrupt government.
What can people do to protect the Lacandone? I mean, the people of this community and also the people around the world. What can be done?
I think that one measure I think that's extremely important, it may seem to be somewhat unrelated, is to support the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, which is indeed one of the first rebel organizations, rebel groups in Latin America, field which I worked in for a long time, that have paid a lot of attention to the environment, and that have placed in all their programs from the very beginning the protection of this forest as being not only their land and their natural resource, but as being a part of the planet. And that's a sense of environmental integrity that we haven't seen in many other, might call them rebel organizations or revolutionary organizations.
Y así como ves estas selvas, es porque los mismos pueblos lo han podido conservar, pero es parte de la concientización. Tenemos que entender que es un medio muy importante, pero además natural, ¿sí? Y que no lo podemos perder, porque son cosas naturales, son cosas de nuestro mundo.
Well, I believe that if they're given a chance, they can protect this rainforest as part of the ongoing culture of Indian people that respect Mother Earth as our mother. And if a revolution can incorporate that sense of history, that principle into their organizing, then I think Indian people will be in a much stronger position hemispherically to survive. Through their survival, the rainforest will survive. The rainforests to Indian people represent the lungs of Mother Earth. There's not many left, and we have to protect what little we have. And I think the Zapatista struggle here represents the indigenous people's struggle throughout the world to save our homeland because it represents our Mother, the Earth.
Awareness of the people of the world of the situation of Chiapas and the pressure that they put on their own governments and on the Mexican government just by the expression of their feelings about this and about remaining aware of what's going on has been tremendously important. I think that if it had not been for this kind of global support, the Zapatistas simply would have been quietly massacred as they have been for the last 500 years.
La estupidez y la soberbia hechas gobierno en las naciones del mundo, el crimen y la impunidad como máxima ley, el robo y la corrupción como industria principal, el asesinato como fuente de legitimidad, la mentira como Dios supremo, cárcel y tumba para los otros que no sean cómplices, la internacional de la muerte, la guerra siempre, eso es el neoliberalismo.
I believe that the United States and the Mexican government are certainly capable of crushing physically the revolution. But remember, the spirit of Crazy Horse, the spirit of Zapata, the spirit of Sandino, the spirit of Simon Bolivar, they're all alive in this hemisphere. So they may stop a few individual human beings, but they'll never stop the fight for justice, the fight to liberate the lands of indigenous people, the fight to protect Mother Earth.
Para que salgamos en la lucha avante, nuestra patria grita y necesita. esfuerzo de los zapatistas. Niños y mujeres, el esfuerzo siempre haremos, campesinos, los obreros, todos juntos con el pueblo. Vamos adelante para que salgamos de la lucha avance, porque nuestra patria grita y necesita de todo el esfuerzo de los zapatistas. Nuestro pueblo dice ya, acabó la explotación, nuestra historia dice ya, lucha de liberación. Vamos adelante para que salgamos de la lucha avante, porque nuestra patria grita y necesita de todo el esfuerzo de los zapatistas.